Hey everybody, welcome to the Bro-op Bytes podcast. I'm your host, Mace.
And I'm your co-host, Proteus, and welcome to episode 4 of our podcast.
Awesome. Good to hear from you, Proteus. Today, I wanted to start off by actually bringing up a comment that we had on our first video. This was probably brought on by the fact that we were talking about Apple and the gaming stuff that was going on with Apple. But it's from AOH398. And he said, I was really excited about Fire Emblem Mobile, and then just disappointment. So, do you have any experience with that game?
Yeah, unfortunately. Yeah, I feel your disappointment, AOH 398. I really liked Fire Emblem. Obviously, I didn't start at the very beginning of the game series, but I did get pulled in with Fire Emblem Awakening on the 3DS. It's one of my favorite strategy RPGs of all time. Like, it is an amazing game if you haven't played it. And it definitely led to, the sequels that they had there on 3DS, and then eventually the one that Fire Emblem Three Houses that came out on Switch that was very popular. I mean, there's been other Fire Emblem games since then, and they've been very popular for Nintendo. But the Fire Emblem mobile game that came out when Nintendo was testing the waters, I believe, for mobile gaming. They released that one. They released a Mario Kart game and an Animal Crossing game. And I'm actually curious if the Fire Emblem one is still alive, because I know
it is.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah, I saw this comment and I downloaded the game. Because
really?
It had been a while, and so I had kind of forgotten about it. Because I have played it too.
Yeah.
I got into Fire Emblem with Game Boy Advance, and
okay.
I only ever played the one game, but I really enjoyed that one. Man, the mobile version was just not good.
It's very much a gotcha.
Yes, exactly. It's a gotcha game. It's designed to frustrate you into spending money, because if you want to unlock the heroes, you really can't do it the honest way. I mean, is it honest? Is it dishonest to spend money? Yes, not honesty is not the right word. The old-fashioned way, right?
The old-fashioned way of playing the game and getting better at it and beating stuff. Yeah, I don't know. I kind of see the appeal of having like a more compact Fire Emblem that you could play like in little spurts, but at the same time, Fire Emblem for me was not like, if I wanted to play it, when I played it on 3DS, it's like I would go sit down and play through the battles, and like it was very intense.
Yes.
But the mobile one, it was bite-sized, and you had like familiar faces from different games and some of the very classic ones. I don't know, like it
probably
was very
more
off-putting.
Enjoyable for big fans of the series, because you know all the characters and everything. I don't know.
Yeah, I agree. Yeah, it's something, but it was definitely made to get people to spend money for the random pulls on like special characters that were on like special events and costumes and all that stuff.
Man,
and
I didn't even. Yeah. So I downloaded. I told you I downloaded it. The number of different events that they constantly have running now. I mean, there is a huge list.
Yeah.
And I'm just thinking, man, how many characters have they added to this game?
Yeah, and at that point, like with a game like Fire Emblem, there is definitely a big part of the balance of the game, having the different enemy types and the hero types. And when you get where it's like you have the whole swath of Fire Emblem characters from like every game ever made and whatever they create for the mobile game, I don't know, like I feel like there's a point where maybe it's not balanced, but maybe that's how they design the game. Because they want you to buy like overpowered characters, which that's a big problem in gachas. There's very few gachas that I'm okay with.
There's always the star levels, right? So you get your little 3-star characters who are nothing and they're not even worth using, and then 5-star characters, which you have to empty your wallet to get.
Yes.
Or you have to empty your wallet to upgrade your 3 stars to 5 stars.
Yes. Or to get copies of the characters so that you can unlock all the abilities.
The dupe system. Anyway, so yes, AOH, lots of disappointment on this podcast for that game. I really wanted to like it. It was not good.
Yes. I agree.
Okay, so let's talk about Concord again, actually. So
Yes, I know we talked about it a couple episodes ago,
it's
because it was,
gone, right? Like it's officially gone.
yeah, Sony went scorched earth on Concord, and it is no longer available anywhere unless you can find a non-destroyed copy on retail shelves, which there may still be. I'm sure there's probably some out in the wild.
Oh no, did you hear about the people who were scalping them for like
Oh, yeah, crazy amounts. It's kind of hilarious that people hated it and now they're just trying to sell it as a collectible. But I get
Yes.
it. It's. I have a couple games that were used to be online, kind of only, like Paragon. People that own the original Fortnite disc, which is very rare now. So it's one of the it's one of those ones. Except this one is very unique in that it failed in about a week and a half, if I remember correctly.
Yes.
It wasn't even 2 weeks. I think people said it was around 11 days of being alive and available with, player counts in the low thousands at the peak, and then definitely in the maybe hundreds or less in the remaining days.
Yeah, I think it was something like 2,000 peak concurrent players on Steam.
Yes.
It was somewhere in that
I,
neighborhood, which is
whew,
it's baffling. That is
yes.
so low.
Yeah, and
Not
for
even just
Sony, like,
for
oh,
something that is a PlayStation game coming to PC and being
yeah,
that low. This is a AAA
yeah.
game. This is a game with a
Well,
well,
I would
okay,
debate the
come on.
AAA, but
Triple A is just a budget. That's all that is. Triple A means
yeah,
it was big budget.
yes, exactly. And
not a statement of
estimates,
quality.
I cannot believe, like, the estimates, which people say take with a grain of salt. $200 million is what people estimated for the development cost, which
Uh-huh.
is incredibly
Well,
high for this type of game. And to say, like, Sony bought Firewalk, the studio that developed Concord, they bought them, like,
and
on
this
the
is the
promise that
first
they were going
game
to
that
make.
they've put
This
out,
is their
right?
first game that they put out, and it is one of the biggest flops in probably the last at least 5 years, maybe less, maybe longer.
Yeah. They took a bath on
Especially
this
since,
one.
and I believe what's being done. A lot of people will say, "Oh, well, they're going to take it down. They're going to make it free. They're going to re-release it free to play." While that may have been an
Mm,
option 5 years ago, maybe 3 years ago, I don't think that that's what's going to happen this time around. From
they're going
what's
to have
been
to
talked
completely
about,
retool it because it wasn't
yes,
built around microtransactions
no, it
or
wasn't, and you
battle
could, like,
passes.
well, I think at one point it was, and then they reined it in because everyone said they hated that. So they changed it into a system that was very much not like a battle pass and not like for microtransactions, but just the core gameplay loop. Like I mentioned in our previous
Yeah.
video that I played the beta, and it was very underwhelming. Very just, it felt like a
Okay.
game that was trying to be too many things all at once. So,
I listen to Skill Up fairly
oh
often,
yeah,
and
yeah,
I like a lot of his content, but he's very optimistic, and he's very
yeah.
much one of those people who is trying to stay on the developer's good side. That's not like I'm not trying to criticize him for that. That's fine.
No, no, I get it.
But
There's definitely a reason YouTubers do that. That's,
yeah, yeah. But even him, when you listen to him talk about Concord
I
before
listened
it
to, yeah, I
released,
did listen to him.
he
So
was struggling for nice things to say about it. He was
yeah,
struggling. And it really sounded like he's like, it's a good game if it were a different game. Is essentially what he ended up
and that,
saying.
like, he was like, it's a good game, or it has the potential to be
Uh-huh.
better. Like, it can become a good game, which
Yes. I
I
I would
I
argue you could
think,
say that about most things.
yeah, I think you could say that. I don't think that was ever a possibility with Concord because it was built to just be a competitor to what already existed, and it just
Uh-huh.
copied ideas from Overwatch. It copied from Destiny, which, to be fair, a lot of the developers were ex Bungie developers for Destiny.
Yep. Do what you
Um,
know is what a lot
but
of these people do.
it was one of those designed by committee games, which I mentioned last time. Is like they wanted to check off
Mm-hmm.
the boxes. How do we put this stuff together where we have a live live service game that and then they developed a game that wasn't good at any of it. It had pieces of Overwatch, but it didn't have all the cohesive pieces. It had pieces of Destiny 2, but not the matching pieces. So you had this mishmash of ideas that didn't ever solidify. It had terrible map design. Terrible. Like for what they wanted to do, some of the objective modes and things like that, it just did not work. They were all trash. The maps were so bad. And then the characters, I don't even want to talk about it. Those characters were some of the ugliest design characters I have ever seen in a video game.
That's a common thing that is being said around
Yeah.
social media now is like the character designs were just awful.
They were just off-putting. Like
I looked at a lot of them and I could probably count on one hand the number that I was like, okay, that's kind of a cool design.
Yeah, I could count on one finger. But it's and even then some of them, worse than being ugly, some of them were so forgettable and bland. And it's you want to make a hero shooter where you don't even recognize any of the people. And that was, I don't know, I just cannot believe that Sony bankrolled this, that they let it go this far, and then now it is literally a week and a half. It was out in the wild and it's dead. And I do not think it is coming back. I think Sony is going to use this as for taxes, like a tax write-off, and that is because they took some very interesting steps. So beyond just taking it off to be like, you cannot buy it, you cannot re-download it. They've refunded all customers on all digital storefronts, whereas so on PlayStation Network and on Steam, I think it was available on Epic as well. Yeah, Steam and Epic. Everyone got full refunds. They told people that bought it at retailers to go back to the retailers and get a refund, like return it, get your refund, and then there were reports that they told the retailers to either, I think they did a return, they wanted the inventory back or destroyed, which for the physical discs.
Really?
Which the only from what, there were a couple reports, I'd have to go look again, but from what I heard is that they were refunding the retailers, which the only way you do that is if you take the product back or they have the retailer destroy it. If that's the case, it's that if that happens, then that means they don't, this is going to be written off, because to be written off, you have to say you lost this much on it. There is no financial benefit at all from the game. So that's why I feel even though they did so much work, they spent almost 200 million or whatever the estimates were. They made, I think estimates where they sold 25,000 copies total, which would make it, maybe they made $1 million, which is insane. So they can say this was a complete loss, complete failure. They can write it off for taxes. They can, if they do that though, I don't think they can re-release any aspect of it as a free-to-play game. And I think that's
really.
Yes, because if they want it to be a tax write-off, especially for that many hundreds of millions of dollars, you cannot have financial benefit from the product being out there again, I don't believe, unless there's some special stipulation.
So
anyways,
can I just point out something that I think is going to be a really bad backlash from the industry?
Yeah.
Is the $40 online multiplayer game is dead. It's well and truly dead and gone. It will not come back. It's free to play from here on out. Now, games that have single player content will still be released.
Yeah.
Like Space Marine 2 just came out and it has a multiplayer online aspect, full price game, but it's also got a single player experience
campaign. Yeah.
Which I think is the main point of it, but you get what I'm saying, right? Is that games like this that are solely meant to be online experiences, PvP, they're just not gonna do the just pay for it and then that's it. Yeah,
I think for them they just say well, it failed very drastically, and it's gonna definitely have a chilling effect for the industry of ever thinking about doing something like this in the near term. I'm trying to think back, what other multiplayer games have there been that were like that besides, I guess, over the original
Overwatch.
Overwatch? The original Overwatch you paid for it. It was a
Team
$60
Fortress
game,
was
wasn't it?
paid for, wasn't it? Originally?
Originally, yeah, it was originally paid for, but it was like a $20 game, I think,
Yeah, I
and that
mean,
yeah,
but
that's been a long time ago.
Concord wasn't $60.
It wasn't, yeah, and so, but the thing is, at some point, Concord I think was going to be free to play, and they were worried about making all that money back in microtransactions. So Sony
They probably
did the
changed it
thing.
after they saw the success of Helldivers.
Yes, I think that was part of it. I think it may have even been before that, like leading into it, seeing that sometimes people do want to pay for the experience and that you can get some of that money. And that's the thing, like with Overwatch, the original one, like Blizzard made a ton of money from selling copies of that game. And then, for the second one to go free to play, I think that I don't know. There's just weird
Didn't
aspects
they
over the
make
last
the
decade of
first one
gaming.
free to play before they did?
They made, didn't they?
They
Yeah, they did
they
after a
swapped
couple of
it
years.
over to free to play.
They did, yeah. So I don't know yeah, but it's going to be interesting going forward. I don't know. I'm curious how studios are going to even think about like multiplayer PvP games, like only ones with no campaigns. Like, is there going to be that chilling effect for everyone that's trying to develop that kind of stuff? I don't know. So
Yeah, I still think that's the case. I just don't think that they're going to do it anymore. I think it will be years before anybody is even willing to try that again.
yeah, and especially Sony. And to be fair to Sony, they started on this course over the last several years. Well, because this one was they reportedly in development for the last 8 years, which would make it from 2016. But this was all under the leadership of Jim Ryan, who is I think retiring this year, or maybe he's
Mm,
already retired. He's on the way out, and or has already left. But his focus was all about live service, all about making those money from microtransactions,
sure.
and it was like you were asking Sony and all of their studios and their teams to make these games that they were not adept at making. They were all very much single player focused studios. And some had multiplayer, but they weren't like this. And to hear like all the strife that has happened within the PlayStation Studios families, it's kind of sad to say like, this game while I'm sad that developers, like some of them probably are losing their jobs over this. But I think,
Guaranteed.
yeah, I think that it needs to happen because, like, you can't spend that much money making product that nobody wants. Like, you can't do that.
Yes.
Like, that is bad for the entire industry. That is bad for Sony. That is bad for all of video gaming, like, as an industry.
I think that a lot of that needs to be scaled back. Games need to not
Yes.
be costing this much to make because that's a big part of the problem, right? They've become completely
Hmm.
risk averse because games cost hundreds of millions of dollars to produce.
Yeah.
And so it's like, well, we have to make money back on this. So
Yeah.
we need to do things that are proven to work, and we're not going to branch out or try anything new.
Yes. So they go
So
to the formula.
yeah,
the
exactly. So they
formula.
go to the formula, but then everybody gets bored of the formula. So then they start losing money anyway, and so then they start copying indies
Hmm.
that have shown success.
Yeah, and then they kill off other studios' versions like Last of Us Factions, which I'm pretty upset about, but that's another
Yeah.
discussion for another day. So yeah, but Sony, where they're at now, so they lost Concord this last week, and then yesterday they had a little announcement. They had I think pre-recorded video, definitely with
Yes.
Mark Cerny, their lead hardware. I think yeah, he did the video similar to this for the PS5 launch. But yeah, yesterday morning they announced the PlayStation 5 Pro.
For the low, low price of $700.
$700 US. Yes.
Yes,
I
US
think it's like
dollars.
800 euros. It's like insane over there.
Oh, wait, 800
Yeah,
euros.
I think it is. Oh, I think it was, or somewhere I was like, whoa, why is the price like, why is
That
it
does
like
not
that
make
much more?
sense.
Yeah, it's even worse. Yeah, so you think, and on IGN they said you think PS5 Pro is expensive in the US, in Europe and Japan it's even worse.
And a euro is 10% more than a dollar.
Yeah, that's the part that I do not
So that's
understand.
880 US dollars.
Well, so in the Tom Warren from the Verge, I think he said the UK pricing for PS5 Pro is beyond ridiculous. Okay, so it's a PS5 Pro. If you add the disc drive, he said it's $1,000, 1,045 US dollars. Which I
Oh.
was like, ooh, that's no, yeah, Euro. I think that's the Euro sign, 799.99. And British pound is, I think, is that pounds? Sorry, I'm not as adept at knowing the different signs, but I think that's the euro is 800. The pound is 700 pounds, which is still more, like, that's more expensive. We actually have the
Yeah.
cheapest priced, and then yen, it is 119,980 yen, which they said works out to converted is about $840. So wow, that's pretty rough. That makes it even worse now hearing that how much the conversion rates are for everyone else. I feel bad about complaining about the U.S. price because that is insanity across the pond and across
Yeah.
on the other side of the world. Like wow,
I just did the conversion for pounds sterling, and
yeah,
it's the base price is like $912 United States
which is
dollars in the
which the
conversion.
euro,
Now,
yeah,
obviously, we have different economies, so it's not that simple, right? People get paid
yeah, it's fine.
differently in different places, but still, it's absurd. It's ridiculous.
And looking at, like, I kind of told you before that I've looked at several polls from just users and ones that have been on YouTube. One that I'm looking at from IGN, they asked, like, is it reasonably priced? The highest answer at almost 74% of answers are it's way too expensive.
Oh wow.
Yeah, so
Now, I
three
will
quarters
say
of people, but
that's pretty standard for, I mean, if you're going to poll people, they're always going to say if it's anything more than what is generally accepted as the norm, they're always going to say it's too
yeah,
expensive. Remember when games went to being $70 and
yeah.
everybody was up in arms about that? You know what's the funny thing about that?
Those are actually, like, those are cheaper than games were before. Like, games have
Legend
actually,
of
yeah, that one,
Zelda
yeah,
Ocarina of Time on the
yeah,
N64 was $70 on release.
and that was $70 in 19, was it 97,
Yes.
96?
I
When was that?
don't
Yeah,
I don't
so
think people
yeah,
understand how good we have it in terms of like the price of games is so reasonable.
yeah, it hasn't changed. Like, it's stuck for so long at 60, and before that at 50, and that was crazy that it did, because yeah,
Yep.
scaling with inflation, like the prices in 90, like in the mid 90s, late 90s, those were expensive. Like $70 back then was a lot. That was like probably
Yeah,
over
that's a
$100.
huge.
Yeah.
And that's why people would just play the same game to death because you couldn't afford to
Mhm.
buy everything that was coming out. And now
Exactly.
with games costing that much, $70, like that's not that bad. And the other thing is that if you just wait, if you're just patient and you don't feel the
You're just
need to
patient
buy
enough.
something as soon as it's
Yep.
released, guess what?
You can get
It's
that.
even cheaper.
Yeah.
You can get it for $30
You can
within a
get the
year.
Ubisoft Gold Edition that costs $150 or about 20 or 30.
Yes,
So,
exactly. Exactly. I
but
I the player charts for games on SteamDB just honestly they shock me.
why? What do you say that?
Because I mean, if you look at especially with AAA games, this is especially a thing with AAA games. You look at the player counts and they are absurdly high. They drop off like 70% at least within the first 2 to 3 months. and
Oh,
they
so you're saying
never
like people
recover.
buy games? Yeah, they buy games at launch for full price.
They buy games for full price at launch, play them, and then never touch them again.
Yeah, and I
And then
think
the other thing
it's
is that the way that game development is done now, if you buy a game at launch, you're paying to be a beta tester
yeah, definitely,
because
definitely.
those games are not released. They're not finished.
They're not finished, no, and yeah, I have feelings about that, and but going back to the PS5 Pro, so
Yes.
with its
Sorry.
insane pricing, yeah, no, yeah, and we'll touch on some of that in our prior next episode.
Yeah.
But the PS5 Pro announced, yeah, yesterday they had a 10-minute presentation with Mark Cerny. He did this whole thing about, okay, we've been listening to players. We have these three pillars that we're gonna focus on. We have an upgraded GPU. It's 67%, more compute units. Overall, it's 45% faster than the base PS5. We have advanced ray tracing that, it's actually, double or triple the speed of the base PS5. And now we're doing AI driven upscaling, and they're calling it PlayStation Spectral Super Resolution. So it's basically FSR, like AMD's version, or DLSS as NVIDIA's version. But those were the three pillars that he talked about and said, this is why, like, these are the things that are upgraded. I don't know. It left a very sour taste in my mouth. It was very hollow. I don't know. Like
Yeah.
I expected a lot more because I'm somebody who actually bought the PS4 Pro back in the day.
Yes.
And while I got a really good deal on it, like that was definitely part of it. I really enjoyed the like going back. I don't know. I don't think I could have. I would have stuck. Like I don't think I could have been playing all the PS4 games that I did on base PS4. Like after I got the Pro, like I got it and never looked back. And I heard people were playing stuff on base PS4s, and I was like, oh my goodness, like it was a big leap. Like it was definitely an improvement.
Yeah.
Um, and I still like to this day I still use my PS4 Pro sometimes when I don't want a game on the PS5. I'll use the Pro and it works great. But that being said, the PS4 Pro was not $700. It definitely was not. And the PS5 was not $700. And that is, I mean, while there is inflation and whatever, it's just that price I think is gonna put off a lot of potential consumers because I listened to multiple YouTube videos. I looked at the comments. I saw some of the live chats. People were saying like they were ready to buy it if it was $600. Was kind of their top level, and they were like ready. But as soon as they announced price, they're like, no, I'm good. I'll stick with the base model.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, and
and
that's
yeah.
another thing that I think is interesting is that development for games, developers take into consideration install bases, right? So if a bunch of
Hmm.
people buy PS5 Pro, then they're going to start developing with higher specs in mind. But if
Yeah.
nobody's playing on it, they're not going to put a lot of effort into
Yeah, into those
making it
modes.
worth it for those people.
Which I think that did happen at the initial launch of the PS4 Pro. Like it didn't sell a lot initially, but it slowly started gaining more buyers like as it was out just because people started seeing, the performance gains. Because they did have PS4 Pro had a boost mode, which the PS5 Pro has a PS5 Pro game boost added, and they said that it applies to more than 8,500 backward compatible PS4 games.
Hmm.
And they said that the feature can stabilize or improve the performance of those PS4 or PS5 games, or enhance the image quality of PS4 games, which that one I think is cool. That goes back to that PSSR, is that what it's called? Yeah, PlayStation
PSSR,
Super
yes.
Resolution. Which, thinking about that, do you think like the PSSR, like, is that something that could potentially be like it's an actual software, not hardware
I
based?
I think
you know.
that it's going to be similar as with FSR. I think that it
Mhm.
could theoretically run on other hardware. I think that they may also be making hardware changes to take better advantage of PSSR. But
Yeah,
I fully believe that with some tweaks, it could run on the base PS5.
yeah. I think with them talking literally about enhancing image quality of PS4 games, with the amount of processing power that the PS5 base PS5 is over the PS4, like I don't see why they couldn't implement something to upscale or do something with the resolutions, which
Yep.
I know they probably won't initially just because they want to try to drive sales of the PS5 Pro, but I don't, like you were saying, I don't know how big this install base is going to be for the Pro. And
Yeah.
did
I
you
think it's
did you
going to
see
have a
anything
lukewarm reception.
reception? Did you see anything in that little presentation that was like a standout game that made you want to get a PS5
No,
Pro?
and see, that was the thing. Okay, I will say this about that whole presentation to me was it felt like the kind of video that you put together for your investors, for your shareholders, for
Yeah.
your management, your the people that you're reporting to. It didn't
Hmm.
feel like marketing material. There was nothing there to get me excited other than it was saying, yeah, games will run smoother and be
Or they'll
prettier.
look
Uh,
sharper. Yeah, it's
yeah,
like,
they'll look sharper. And
and it's
what
like
was really funny was when you were looking at if you look at the
comparisons.
actual comparisons, it was like
Yeah.
playing Spot the Difference.
Oh my goodness, yeah, and
And it's
especially
like,
on with YouTube compression, obviously. But like, I
oh
was
yes,
struggling on a couple of those. I was like,
okay,
What's different?"
okay. YouTube compression is not an excuse though. They put
No, no, it's
together
not.
that promotional material and they know it's going to be mainly viewed on YouTube,
Yeah.
and they should have put it together in a way that would like blow up, show a zoom in of a certain part of the screen and compare
Well,
that, right?
I think they did like once, and I was still like,
They
"Wait a minute.
did, and
Okay, I
I think
think
it was
it's
like,
slightly sharper. Like it's
yeah, it
not as
was the Ratchet
blurry."
and
But
Clank thing that they were showing, and then
yeah.
I think they also did it with Spider-Man.
Yeah, I think the Spider-Man one I saw, but it's like nothing in that presentation wowed me. There was no new game to be like, look, this new game is gonna push the PS5 and the PS5 Pro to its limits and give you like something amazing. All they did was like, oh, we're
Mm-hmm.
gonna patch all these old games. Like, hey, you remember Ratchet and Clank? Oh yeah, that came out what 2 years ago. You should play that again. Remember Spider-Man 2 that came out last year? What about that Horizon game? What about Hogwarts Legacy? It's like everyone already played those games. Like they play them.
Yeah,
Like, and your
you're
consumer,
banking
you're
on people loving those games so much to where they're going to want to come back and play it again with a few changes to the graphics or performance.
yeah,
Look, these games aren't
and
Skyrim.
that's
You can't just re-release them over and over again and people aren't going to just
no,
keep coming back.
yeah. They've already released. How many times have they released The Last of Us and like remaster, remake, different
Yes.
versions on different from like
Remaster and
across three
remake, yeah.
generations, and I just
Well, see,
it
they did
I
do that
was
though.
disappointed. They did do that. But the thing is, well, first off, like that being said, there was no killer app. There's nothing like, oh
No.
yeah, I gotta buy it for this. All it was like, hey, these games are gonna get patched, and guess what? You can play it at 60 FPS and at an upscaled 4K. Well, before you could play it at 60 FPS at 1440p, or you could play it at 4K at 30, which I was like, I've played lots of those games at 1440 at 60, and they look great on my 4K TV. Like they look good. I sit far enough back that
Hmm.
it's like I can't tell,
Well, the
and
other thing
I
is that
I
I'm
just don't
pretty
care.
sure your TV's upscaler does a decent job anyway.
Yes, it does. So even when it is a lower resolution, my TV does have upscaling, and so even if the output is lower, there's like double upscaling. on these
Yeah.
things. So it's like I, yeah, I was kind of at a loss. Like I do not know what Sony is doing, but I feel like they need to right the ship over there. They
Oh,
whatever has been
yeah.
happening for this generation, they lost. I feel like they've lost all of the momentum and goodwill that they built up in the PS4 generation, where they were very open with consumers, where they were still trying different games. They weren't just releasing remakes and rehashes over and over again and just expecting people to buy it. They had their
Hmm.
executives were talking to the consumer. I mean, do you remember the when the PS4 and the Xbox One were being released, and Microsoft was like, "Oh yeah, you're gonna have the on-disc DRM that has to connect to the internet."
Yes.
And then Sony, out of nowhere, like the next day, they released that little. This is how we share games on PS4, and uh, who was it? It
It
had
was
two of their
somebody
exec.
just like handing the game to
Yeah, he's
somebody
like, "This
else.
is how we share," and he just hands it to me. He said, "Thank you," and then it was a 2 second song. It was hilarious, and it it made it feel like they were listening because
Yep.
they kind of were, and
And
then out of
now everything
nowhere,
requires PSN, and everybody
hmm
hates it, and they're not really changing course on it. They kind of rolled it back for a minute, and then they were like, well, no,
and
we're
then
still going to
they
do it.
yeah, and I just feel like they've lost sight. I think it was definitely part of the leadership with Jim Ryan when I think he took over from Sean Layden, who was very, very open. He loved talking. Like he'd been in the industry for years and years. I think he worked as in development and stuff. And then you went to this guy who's just like he's been an executive his whole life. He's been at other companies, other businesses, and he wants to
Hmm.
implement similar stuff for PlayStation. He had no real background. Like you ask him about games, he'd make stuff up because he didn't know what he was talking about.
Yep.
And it
So
was just
this
like
is a big thing
this
that
leadership. Yeah.
bothers me in general about the direction of the games industry is it is being taken
Mhm.
over by executives, like career
Yeah.
executives
hmm
who are not developers. You look back
No.
at the way that things used to be run. Look at id Software. id Software was run by a bunch of gamers. Like,
hmm
that's who it was run by. And
Yeah.
they released things that were revolutionary, that changed
Yeah.
the industry forever in a great way. And
Yeah. And
just
now
as
it's just
more of
I
these
feel like
execs
they're
have taken over, and you've got probably layers of middle management now, it's just
yeah,
it's not
for
good.
sure. I think it goes going back to PS5 Pro that it's like they looked at Apple and they're like Apple sells expensive things and they release them over and over and people keep buying them at these high prices. And they're just like we should do that. Like we need to be profitable on this hardware. And it's like yeah, but in the olden days like they sold the PS3 at a loss for years.
Yep.
And they did that because they had so much software that was able to make up the difference.
Well, and
And
that's the model that worked, right?
it
Is
worked, yeah.
sell the hardware at a loss, because really where you're making the money is from selling software. It's
Yeah.
you
And the
want to
thing was,
increase your install base.
you want to do that. And the thing was like with that, they allowed for more chances to succeed and more chances to fail. So they gave developers enough room to try things out. And I feel like there is like you were saying earlier, there's no room. Like the budgets are too big. Like they can't do that anymore because
Right.
of how they've changed the business model. And
It's too
before,
risky.
like, we were talking about Concord, $200 million. You know how many the old
Yeah.
games that they used to make that could have been like 20, $10 million games. Like, or yeah, no,
I'm also
like,
kind of curious if that 200 million estimate, if that's
mhm.
just development or if that's development and marketing. Because
And marketing,
believe
probably
it or
both.
not, the marketing is more expensive than the development.
Oh yeah, marketing is
They
insane.
spend
But
they
they
spend.
did.
I was listening to a podcast one time, and a former uh, developer for Call of Duty, she was talking
Mhm.
about how expensive it was, and she said that it was like They spent $50 million on development, on making the game. You know how much they
Wow.
spent on marketing it? $200 million.
Oh goodness.
So you're talking about four times as much for the marketing as you do for like actually making the product.
Yeah, that's crazy. That's not sustainable. I don't know right now. I'm curious to see where the console industry is going to go. Next year will be interesting. I know, there's been many reports saying that's when Nintendo Switch 2 is coming out.
Yep.
The surge of handheld PCs like the Steam Deck and ROG Ally and Legion Go. There is a lot of competition going on there. There's talks that Sony is wanting to make another PSP that will be very similar. I think will probably run on those type of AMD chips. Xbox has definitely talked about their interest in making their own like handheld to also stream.
Yes.
Yeah, because they want to stream Game Pass. They want another way for people to play Game Pass.
Yep.
And so I think it's going to be an interesting year. I'm curious how the PS5 Pro initial sales will be. I feel like they're going to be soft, especially with the economy the way it is. I think it will underperform what Sony hopes.
Is anticipating or hopes.
Yeah,
okay.
But it may if they do a price drop next year, if they drop it 50 to 100, they'll probably be able to move more units. But as it is right now, I don't see a ton of people buying it except for the diehard.
It's really potential. I think there's a potential that that's the strategy, actually, is release it at an absurd price. That way, when you price drop it, it will sell better.
Gives you that. Yeah.
Because if you think about it, right, most people are going to think along the lines of, oh, if it had been announced for $600, there would have been people who would have said, this is too expensive, I'm not interested.
Yeah.
Well, they're releasing it for $700 and then cutting the price $100 down to $600. Those same people might be like, "Oh, it's $100 off."
Yeah, and maybe they throw in a disk drive, which you have to buy separately for another $80.
or the plastic stand.
$30 stand. It's the $30 plastic stand that was included for free with the PS5 original one.
It's a piece of plastic. It's a piece of plastic that can be produced. I mean, they probably spend cents producing those.
Yeah. It's crazy that they're. I don't know. So technically, I mean, it's $700 US dollars, but if you want it with a disk drive and a stand, it's about $810 before tax.
Yep.
Which is that I'm like, at that point, you could literally build a pretty decent little PC that has a lot more capability.
Yeah.
I was gonna say, if you're in the $800 range, like you can
$800, you could build something.
Yeah, that would play a lot of PlayStation games because they're all on Steam now.
Yes. So. Now, I mean, $800. I don't think you could compete with a console in terms of performance for $800. But
no, but you could. Well, you could do some upgrades to your PC for $800, and it would be probably better than
PS5
Pro.
Yeah, there's Anyway, let's talk about some upcoming games.
Yeah.
So
what do you have on your radar?
Something that I have on my radar coming up very soon, and many of you will be aware of this, is the Until Dawn remake that's coming out.
Is it a remake or re-release?
Oh, no, it's a remake. Completely different development studio. Because it's...
Yeah, because it was from... what is it? The ones that made all the Dark Pictures anthology. Supermassive. Yeah, that's right.
Yeah. Supermassive. This was what kicked it all off for them.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know that it was their first game.
Oh, wow. That's right,
yeah. I guess they say it's rebuilt and enhanced, but rebuilt to me implies that's a remake, right?
And I think Okay, now that you mention it, and I'm seeing
It's
some
all
of the footage. I think it's in Unreal 5, maybe, or like it got an upgraded game engine.
yes, it's definitely in a new game engine.
Yeah,
It's a
yeah,
remake. Even if they're not
yeah.
calling it that, that's definitely what it is.
The thing is, did you know the original Until Dawn? I believe so. It released on PS4, but it was actually being developed for PS3 back in the day. I
Really?
believe the original tech demo had PlayStation. It was a PlayStation Move game. So you have the PlayStation Move
No.
controllers. I
That
think.
makes
I believe.
sense.
Yeah.
That
I
makes
think that's
sense
what it
with
was.
how it was built. So okay, I'm really excited for this one for a few reasons. One,
Yeah.
I am a big fan of supermassive games. I know a lot of people say they aren't even games, they're just interactive movies. And okay, there
That's
is
so
there is
what? What if it
some
is
truth
like?
to that, but
Yeah.
what what constitutes a game?
Mm-hmm. You
It
do press
it's
buttons.
it's just
You
splitting
read things.
hairs. It's just splitting hairs. It
Yeah.
doesn't matter.
It's more
I
of like a
enjoy
choose
them.
your own adventure thing. So.
I played all of the Dark Picture anthologies um, last
Eh,
October,
yeah, you went
and
through
I loved all of them.
like all of them. Yeah.
Yeah, I played
And
all of
did you
them
play?
that
Did
month.
you play? What was the other one? Um
The Quarry.
the Quarry. Yeah, I was
Yes, the
trying to remember
Quarry.
what it was called.
And that one is their best by far that I've
Really?
played. That
Okay.
I've played. So I've
I've heard
never
many
played
mixed
Until
things about.
Dawn. Well, yeah, but
Yeah.
that's the thing
Oh,
is
you've
that
never played
people.
on Until Dawn?
No, I've never played Until Dawn. I would believe that you
Okay.
hear mixed things about it, but I think that supermassive games always get mixed reviews because people will see the
Hmm.
cinematic trailers that they have and they're like, "Oh, this looks cool," and they buy it and they're like, "What is this?" You know what
Yeah.
I'm saying? Anyway,
Yeah.
so I mean, it's the best. I could get into that on another episode, but it is the Quarry
Well,
is the
I'm curious.
best.
I think. Well, I think you'll like Until Dawn then, if because Until Dawn's pretty impressive. I played through the majority of it
Yeah.
several years ago,
So,
so
and
it's pretty intense.
that's the thing that excites me about it is that this is one that is releasing first
Hmm.
day one on PC. I thought
Okay.
I would
So
never get to play
yeah,
this because I was like, this one's going to be stuck on PlayStation forever. I'm never going to play
yeah,
it.
and yeah, now you're
I,
actually getting access
I
to
thought
some of these
about
games that you've
asking you to
wanted to
borrow
play.
your PlayStation so I could play it.
Well, now you're gonna
um,
get the better version. So
yes,
yeah.
now I'll get the better version. So I'm glad that I waited. Um, so yeah, I'm pretty excited about this one. It should be good.
Is is this one coming out this month or is it in October, like close to
October.
Halloween?
This one is coming out
Okay,
in October.
sounds about right. Yeah,
Uh-huh.
yeah. That one.
October 4th.
Okay, that'll be a fun one to play
Yep.
on the
So I got
Halloween
that one
season.
and I got the other supermassive game that just came out, which is getting very mixed
Mhm.
reviews. That's
Wait,
the
what?
casting of Frank Stone.
Wait, did Supermassive work on that one? That's the one. It's like a
Yeah,
Dead by Daylight tie-in, right?
it's a
Is that
Dead by Daylight tie-in, yeah.
correct? Okay.
Yep. I have not played it yet. I'm waiting
Okay.
for some patches because it's pretty choppy. And that's getting to be a common
Gotcha.
thing for me because I'm running fairly old hardware.
Mm-hmm.
And the games that have been coming out the past year or two, they're just not well optimized for, you know, hardware as old as mine.
Yeah, it makes sense, but yeah, sometimes nowadays you probably should just wait for patches, just because it seems like we
Oh,
all end
yeah.
up testing the games after they're
Yep.
released.
Anyway, so tell me about your game.
So, one of the ones that is coming out, I believe it's the end of this month. Yeah, or no, it's end of October. So East X Nordics, or yeah, so this is one very obviously it's the 10th game in the series, long running. It's been around. It's a Falcom. Is it? Yeah, Falcom game. And so it's an action RPG. Definitely, you can see it from the trailer. It's anime inspired, but I loved. Was it the E7, Lacrimosa of Dana. Great game. Awesome. Like, awesome story. The combat is super fun. It's, fast paced. You have cool abilities, lots of very interesting characters, and just cool story concepts that it's, I don't know, some of it I feel like is so unique just because of like the Japanese developers. They just have crazy ideas sometimes.
Yeah,
And
for
so
sure.
the cool thing about these games, so this is the 10th one in the series, but it's actually chronologically, I think it's like the third, or it's like really early in the timeline. So each game, while they are numbered, they do not take place in chronological order at
Yep.
all. Like
Okay.
I think
So like
so
Final
this one is,
Fantasy, right? Final Fantasy is the same way.
well, Final Fantasy just take place. Most of them take place in different universes, so they're like completely
Oh.
like they.
Oh,
There's
okay.
some that
So
do
I'm
relate, like
showing my ignorance here.
Final Fantasy. Like there's multiple Final Fantasy tens, like 10, 10 2, and then there's I'm trying to think some of the other ones. There's other offshoots of Final Fantasy 12 that took place, like tactics game and stuff that took place in that universe. But the core ones are all separate, like universes, if that's the easiest way to say it.
Yeah.
But Yeast is just so Adol, he's the guy, the red hair. He's Adol, is the main character. This one, I believe he's pretty young. I think he's like 18 or 19. And in the one that I like, 7, which is like my favorite, he was, I think, in his mid 20s or late 20s. So they do have references to the prior games, and there's kind of like little Easter eggs and stuff, but they take place kind of out of order, but they all are cohesive on this like big timeline of like what's happening in their world. So it's really cool. If you haven't ever played them before, like the older ones are a little harder. Like they don't have the refined combat, obviously. I think past, well, 7's awesome, and or no, is it 8? I'm trying to remember. Actually, I'm getting my numbers mixed up. It might be 8. Yeah, maybe it's. I think Lacrimosa of Dana is 8. 7, I
Gotcha.
think, was on PSP. So or PS Vita. They've released on so many platforms. It's like all over the place because the originals were like on SNES or SNES, and so they've been around a while. Like this is a long running franchise. They've had
Yeah.
stuff on
So I mean, it
PlayStation,
looks
PC. Yeah,
cool. It's
if you're
more
into
of an
that, yeah,
action RPG kind of
it
thing.
is an ARPG. Yeah, it is.
Okay.
Like some of it's kind of, but sometimes the combat feels button mashy, but there's like special combos and abilities. And this one, it has that dual. The girl, I don't remember her name. I'd have to rewatch the trailer, but I think you switch between the two of them, and you do like kind of dual combos with each other. There's like
Okay.
some, I think it showed in the trailer where you get to kind of like surf around, and there's like very quick
Yes,
movement
it did
skills.
show that. Yeah.
It usually has an awesome soundtrack, like great songs that get stuck in your head. But I'm excited for it. Like I really enjoyed Lacrimosa of Dana, and I think Monstrum Nox is also very well regarded. That was the Yeast 9, which is later in the timeline. But yeah, so that one, looking forward to
Nice.
that. Falcom is doing really well. Like I'm glad that they're kind of a niche JRPG, like all their games, but they've been doing really well in the West as of late, and I'm glad that they have been. So I'm glad they're bringing this game actually to the West. So yeah,
Yeah.
that one looks
Cool.
cool.
Well, awesome. All right. Well, that's all the time that we have. Thank you for listening, and if you have any comments, please leave them below. Like we've said before, we love hearing from you guys. We will make a point of responding in a video, or we will try and respond in the comments. We do read them. Like and subscribe, and we hope to see you next time.
Yeah, we'll see you then. Peace out.